I was 19 when my mother threw me out of the house. 19, scared, and holding my 2-month-old daughter in my arms while the November rain poured down on us both. I can still remember every detail of that afternoon. The way the sky had turned that particular shade of gray that only happens in Seattle during late fall. The smell of wet pavement, mixed with the faint scent of coffee from the cafe 3 blocks down. The weight of little Mia in my arms, wrapped in the pink blanket my grandmother had knitted before she passed away. My mother stood in the doorway of our small house in the Beacon Hill neighborhood, her face twisted in an expression I had never seen before. It was not just anger. It was something colder, something final. She had always been a hard woman, shaped by years of working double shifts at the hospital as a nurse and raising me alone after my father left when I was 5. But that day, she looked at me like I was a stranger who had betrayed her in the worst possible way. "You made your choice," she said. Her voice was steady, controlled, which somehow made it worse than if she had been screaming. "You chose to keep that baby. You chose to throw away your future. Now you deal with the consequences. I do not have room in my life for your mistakes." I tried to explain again, tried to make her understand that I had not planned any of this. That Nathan, Mia's father, had promised he would stay, had promised we would figure it out together. That I had believed him when he said he loved me. But Nathan had disappeared the moment I told him I was pregnant, blocking my number and moving to California without a word. I was left alone, my college plans abandoned, my savings account nearly empty from prenatal care and baby supplies. "Mom, please," I begged, shifting Mia higher on my shoulder as the rain started to soak through my jacket. "I just need a little more time. I am looking for a job. I can help with bills. I can do anything. Just please do not do this." She shook her head slowly, and I saw something flash in her eyes. Was it regret? Pain? I could not tell. All I knew was that she was not going to change her mind. "I gave you 3 months," she said. 3 months to figure out your situation. You have not found work. You have not made any progress. I cannot carry you anymore. I have my own life to think about." Behind her, through the doorway, I could see the living room where I had grown up. The old brown couch where I had done my homework every night. The bookshelf filled with my childhood books and the trophies from track and field competitions. The framed photo of me at high school graduation, smiling widely in my cap and gown, full of hope for the future. That girl felt like someone from another lifetime. "What about Mia?" I asked, my voice breaking. "She is your granddaughter. Does not that mean anything to you?" My mother's jaw tightened. "That baby is not my responsibility. She is yours. You wanted to be an adult and make adult decisions. Fine. Now be an adult and handle it." And with that, she stepped back and closed the door. I heard the lock click into place. I stood there on the porch for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the rain getting heavier, Mia starting to whimper against my chest. My phone had been disconnected 2 weeks earlier because I could not afford the bill. I had $47 in my wallet, a duffel bag with some clothes and baby supplies, and nowhere to go. The walk to the bus stop felt endless. My sneakers were soaked through within minutes, and I tried to keep Mia as dry as possible by hunching over her, using my body as a shield against the rain. She was crying now, that high-pitched wail that newborns make when they are uncomfortable. I whispered to her that everything would be okay, but I did not believe my own words. I got on the number 36 bus heading downtown, using some of my precious cash for the fare. The bus driver, a middle-aged black man with kind eyes, looked at me and Mia with concern. "You okay, miss?" he asked. I nodded quickly, not trusting my voice, and found a seat near the back. The bus was mostly empty except for an elderly woman with grocery bags and a teenage boy with headphones in, both of them carefully avoiding looking at me. I suppose I must have been quite a sight, dripping wet, holding a crying baby, my eyes red from trying not to break down completely. As the bus rumbled through the Seattle streets, I tried to think clearly. I had a friend from high school, Brianna, who lived somewhere in the Capitol Hill area. We had not talked much since graduation, but maybe she would let me crash on her couch for a few nights. I also knew there was a women's shelter on 3rd Avenue, though the thought of taking Mia there made my stomach turn. I had heard stories about those places, about how crowded they were, how you had to leave during the day, how your belongings sometimes got stolen. The rain kept falling as the bus passed through downtown. I watched people hurrying along the sidewalks under umbrellas, rushing to their warm homes and normal lives. Coffee shops glowed with golden light. Restaurants were starting to fill up with the dinner crowd. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to belong except me. Mia finally quieted down, exhausted from crying, her small body relaxed against mine. I looked down at her tiny face, her eyes closed, her mouth slightly open. She looked so peaceful, so trusting. She had no idea how badly I had already failed her. She had no idea that her mother was homeless, jobless, and completely alone in the world. I got off the bus at Pike Street and started walking toward where I thought Brianna might live. The streets were busy with evening traffic, cars splashing through puddles, their headlights reflecting off the wet pavement. My arms were starting to ache from carrying Mia and the duffel bag, but I kept going, one foot in front of the other. When I finally found Brianna's apartment building, my heart sank. It was one of those newer complexes with a security entrance and an intercom system. I did not even know her apartment number. I stood outside for a long time, watching people come and go, hoping to spot her. Eventually, a young guy in a business suit held the door open for me, probably assuming I lived there. I wandered the hallways for over an hour, reading name tags on doors, but I never found Brianna's name. Maybe she had moved. Maybe I had the wrong building. Or maybe this was just not meant to work out. By then, Mia was hungry and crying again, and I needed to find somewhere to feed and change her. I ended up in the bathroom of a Starbucks on Broadway, one of the few places still open and busy enough that no one would bother a wet, exhausted girl with a baby. I changed Mia's diaper on the changing table, fed her with one of the bottles I had prepared that morning, and tried to clean myself up a bit in the mirror. I looked terrible. My dark hair was plastered to my head, my face was pale and drawn, and there were dark circles under my brown eyes. A woman came into the bathroom, well dressed in business casual attire, carrying an expensive-looking purse. She glanced at me and Mia, and I saw the familiar look of judgment cross her face. The look that said she knew exactly what my situation was, and that she thought it was my own fault. She washed her hands quickly and left without a word. I sat down on the closed toilet lid, holding Mia close, and finally let myself cry. Quiet tears at first, then harder sobs that I tried to muffle against Mia's blanket. I cried for my mother's rejection, for Nathan's abandonment, for the future I had lost, and for the impossible situation I was in. But most of all, I cried because I did not know how I was going to take care of this innocent baby who depended on me for everything. When I finally pulled myself together, I left the Starbucks and started walking again. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the temperature was dropping. I needed to find somewhere warm to spend the night. The shelter seemed like the only option now. It took me another 40 minutes to walk to the shelter on 3rd Avenue. By the time I got there, it was after 9 o'clock and the line outside was long. Mostly women, some with children, all of us wearing the same expression of desperation and exhausted hope. A staff member came out to tell us that they were already at capacity, but they would do their best to find spaces for families with young children. I waited in line for 2 more hours, Mia sleeping fitfully in my arms. My whole body hurt. My feet were blistered from walking in wet shoes. My shoulders burned from carrying the baby in the bag. But I stayed in line because I had no other choice. Finally, around 11:30, they let me in. The intake process was humiliating. I had to answer questions about my situation, prove that Mia was mine, submit to a bag search, and sign a bunch of forms. The intake counselor, a tired-looking woman in her 50s named Patricia, was kind enough, but there was a practiced efficiency to her interactions that made it clear she had seen hundreds of cases just like mine. They gave me a cot in a room with 7 other women and their children. The room smelled like disinfectant and something else I could not quite identify. The walls were painted a depressing beige. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I could hear babies crying in other rooms, women talking in low voices, footsteps in the hallway. I lay down on the thin mattress with Mia beside me, still in her wet clothes, because I did not have the energy to change. I stared at the stained ceiling tiles and wondered how my life had fallen apart so completely in such a short time. Just a year ago, I had been planning for college. I had been accepted to the University of Washington with a partial scholarship. I was going to study education and become a teacher. I had dreams and goals and a clear path forward. Now I was 19 years old, homeless, and solely responsible for a tiny human being who needed constant care. My mother had disowned me. The father of my child had disappeared. My friends had all moved on with their lives. I had nothing and no one. But as I lay there in that shelter, listening to Mia's soft breathing beside me, something shifted inside me. It was subtle at first, like the first hint of light before dawn. It was not hope exactly, not yet. It was something more fundamental than that. It was a determination, fierce and stubborn, that began to grow in my chest. I looked at my daughter's small face in the dim light. She was innocent of all this mess. She did not ask to be born into such difficult circumstances. She deserved better than this. She deserved a mother who would fight for her, who would find a way forward no matter how impossible it seemed. I made a promise to her that night, silently, in that crowded shelter room. I promised that I would figure this out, that I would find a job, save money, get us our own place, that I would give her a good life, even if I had no idea how I was going to do it, that I would never give up, no matter how hard things got. I did not know it then, but that promise would shape everything that came after. It would drive me through the hardest years of my life, push me to keep going when every logical part of me wanted to quit, and eventually lead me to a future I could not have imagined in that dark moment. But that night, all I knew was that I had to survive. I had to make it to tomorrow, and then the day after that, one day at a time. I finally fell asleep sometime after midnight, exhausted beyond measure, my hand resting protectively on Mia's small chest, feeling the rise and fall of her breathing. It was the worst day of my life, but it was also, in a strange way, the beginning of something new. The first 3 months at the shelter were the hardest period of my life. I had to wake up at 6 every morning, feed and change Mia, pack up all our belongings, and be out of the building by 8. The shelter had strict rules. You could not stay during the day unless you were sick and had documentation from their on-site nurse. So every single day, regardless of the weather, I found myself back on the streets of Seattle with a 3-month-old baby and nowhere to go. The public library became my sanctuary. The Central Library on 4th Avenue opened at 10 on weekdays, and I was usually one of the first people through the doors. The staff there, especially a librarian named Joyce with gray hair and reading glasses on a chain, seemed to understand my situation without me having to explain. She never made me feel unwelcome, even when Mia got fussy and I had to walk her around the aisles to calm her down. I spent hours at the library every day. I used the computers to search for jobs, filling out application after application for anything I was remotely qualified for. Retail positions, food service, cleaning jobs, receptionist roles. Most required experience I did not have or availability I could not provide because I had no childcare. The few callbacks I got ended the moment I mentioned I had an infant. Joyce noticed my struggle and quietly slipped me information about resources I did not know existed. There was a food bank 2 blocks away that was open on Tuesdays and Thursdays. There was a clinic that provided free checkups for babies. There was a program through the city that helped young mothers get their GED if they had not finished high school, though I had at least managed to graduate before everything fell apart. During those long days, I watched Mia grow and change. She started smiling at me around 6 weeks, these big, gummy grins that made all the hardship feel almost bearable. She began to recognize my voice and my face, her eyes tracking me whenever I moved. I talked to her constantly about everything and nothing, describing the books we passed in the library, the people we saw on the streets, the dreams I still had for our future. Other homeless people taught me survival skills I never knew I would need. An older woman named Caroline, who slept a few cots away from me at the shelter, showed me which churches gave out free meals and which ones asked too many questions. A young guy named Tommy, who often hung out at the same coffee shops I did, taught me how to make a single cup of coffee last for hours and which establishments were most tolerant of people like us taking up space. I also learned the hard way about the judgment that comes with being a young, homeless mother. The stares in public places, the way some people would pull their children away from us like poverty was contagious. The comments, sometimes said just loud enough for me to hear. She probably just wants welfare money. But she does not even know who the father is. Too young to have any sense of responsibility. Each comment felt like a knife, but I learned to keep my head up and keep moving. I had no energy to waste on strangers who knew nothing about my life or my circumstances. I needed to focus every ounce of my strength on surviving and finding a way out. The breakthrough came on a rainy afternoon in late January. I was at a McDonald's on Pike Street, nursing a small coffee and trying to keep Mia entertained with a plastic spoon, when a woman at the next table struck up a conversation. Her name was Linda, and she was probably in her early 60s, with short auburn hair and a warm smile. She had been watching me interact with Mia, and something in my situation seemed to touch her. We talked for over an hour. I found myself telling her everything, the words just pouring out after months of holding it all in. About my mother kicking me out, about Nathan disappearing, about living in the shelter and desperately trying to find work, about feeling like I was failing Mia every single day. Linda listened to all of it without judgment, just nodding and occasionally asking gentle questions. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, then reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. She told me she ran a small cleaning company that serviced office buildings and apartment complexes around Seattle. The work was mostly evenings and early mornings, and she might be able to work around my schedule. But the real gift was what she offered next. She said she understood how impossible it was to work without childcare, and she had been thinking about hiring someone to watch her grandson a few evenings a week while her daughter worked late shifts as a nurse. If I was interested, maybe we could help each other. I could bring Mia along when I watched her grandson, and she would pay me for both the babysitting and the cleaning work. I almost cried right there in the McDonald's. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a start. It was more than anyone had offered me in months. I accepted immediately, probably too eagerly, but I did not care. This was the first real opportunity one had been given. I started working for Linda the following week. The babysitting was Tuesday and Thursday evenings from 6 to 10, watching her 2-year-old grandson Caleb at her daughter's apartment in the Northgate area. Caleb was a sweet, energetic kid who took to Mia immediately, fascinated by the tiny baby. I would feed him dinner, play with him, get him ready for bed, all while managing Mia's needs as well. It was exhausting, but it was honest work, and Linda paid me in cash at the end of each evening. The cleaning work was harder physically, but gave me a sense of accomplishment I had not felt in a long time. Linda would pick me up at the shelter at 5 in the morning on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I would bring Mia in her car seat, and we would drive to whichever building was on the schedule that day. Linda showed me how to clean efficiently and thoroughly, how to handle different surfaces and materials, how to manage time so we could get through multiple locations in a morning. Mia would sleep in her car seat or in a portable playpen Linda had found at a thrift store while I worked. As she got older and more alert, she would lie on a blanket and watch me work, gurgling and cooing. I talked to her the whole time, explaining what I was doing, singing songs, making silly faces to make her laugh. The money was not much, but it was mine, earned through my own effort, not charity or government assistance. Linda paid me $250 a week total, which does not sound like a lot, but to me it was everything. It meant I could start saving. It meant I could buy diapers and formula without having to visit the food bank. It meant I had options I did not have before. I opened a bank account, my first ever, and started depositing money every week. I kept a little notebook where I tracked every dollar I earned and every dollar I spent. I calculated how long it would take to save enough for an apartment deposit and first month's rent. The numbers were daunting. Even the cheapest studio apartments in Seattle were running $700 to $800 a month, and most landlords wanted first month, last month, and a deposit up front. But I had a goal now, something concrete to work toward. Every time I felt discouraged, every time I was so tired I could barely stand, I would look at that notebook and remind myself that I was making progress. Slow progress, but progress nonetheless. Linda became more than just an employer. She became a mentor and eventually a friend. She had her own story of struggle, having raised 3 kids on her own after her husband died in a construction accident when she was 30. She understood what it meant to fight for your children, to keep going when everything felt impossible. She taught me practical skills beyond just cleaning, how to present myself professionally, how to speak up for what I needed without being apologetic about it, how to believe that I was capable of more than my current circumstances suggested. She also gave me hope that there were still good people in the world, people who would help without expecting anything in return. By March, I had saved almost $1,000. It was not enough for an apartment yet, but it felt like a fortune to me. More importantly, I had proven to myself that I could earn money and support Mia, that I was not helpless or hopeless, that I could build something from nothing if I just kept working at it. Around that same time, Joyce at the library told me about a nonprofit organization that helped young mothers find affordable housing. They had a program where they would co-sign leases and provide deposits for women who could prove they had steady income and were actively working toward stability. The process involved interviews, background checks, and lots of paperwork, but Joyce helped me navigate all of it. In April, 2 weeks after Mia turned 7 months old, I was approved for an apartment through the program. It was a tiny studio in the Rainier Valley neighborhood, maybe 400 square feet total, in an older building that had seen better days. But it was ours, our own space with a door that locked, a small kitchen, a bathroom, and enough room for a bed and Mia's crib. The day we moved in, I sat on the floor of that empty studio and cried. But unlike all the tears I had shed over the past 6 months, these were tears of relief and gratitude and exhausted triumph. I had done it, against all odds, with no support from my family, with every possible disadvantage. I had gotten my daughter off the streets and into a home. Linda helped me furnish the place with items from thrift stores and yard sales. A mattress and box spring someone was giving away for free on Craigslist. A small table and 2 chairs. A lamp. Some dishes and pots and pans. Everything was mismatched and worn, but it was ours, and I loved every piece of it. I kept working for Linda, and gradually started taking on additional cleaning clients on my own. Word spread that I was reliable and did good work, and people began calling me directly. By summer, I was making enough money to cover rent, utilities, food, and start putting a little away in savings again. Mia was growing so fast. She learned to sit up on her own, then to crawl, then to pull herself up on furniture. She babbled constantly, these long streams of baby sounds that almost seemed like she was trying to have conversations with me. She was curious about everything, grabbing at whatever she could reach, putting everything in her mouth, laughing at the simplest things. I was exhausted all the time, working long hours and taking care of a baby with no breaks and no help, but I was also happier than I had been in a long time. I was building a life, piece by piece. It was not the life I had planned, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. On Mia's first birthday in September, I threw her a small party in our studio apartment. Linda came with her daughter and grandson. Joyce from the library stopped by with a gift. A couple of the other young mothers I had met at various services over the year came with their kids. It was not a big celebration, just some cupcakes and balloons and toys from the dollar store, but seeing Mia's face light up as everyone sang happy birthday to her made me feel like I had accomplished something truly important. That night, after everyone left and Mia was asleep in her crib, I stood by the window looking out at the Seattle skyline in the distance. The city lights glowed against the dark sky, and I thought about how far I had come since that rainy November night when my mother had thrown me out. I thought about all the moments when I could have given up, when I could have called child services and said I could not do this anymore, when I could have begged my mother to take me back, even though she had made it clear she did not want us, when I could have decided that this life was too hard and I was too young and too unprepared. But I had not given up. I had kept going, and now I had the small, imperfect, but deeply cherished life that I had built with my own 2 hands. I did not know it then, but I was just at the beginning of the journey. There were still years of hard work ahead, more obstacles to overcome, more moments of doubt and struggle. But I had learned the most important lesson, that I was capable of more than I ever imagined. That love for my child could give me strength I did not know I possessed. That sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most meaningful destinations. And I had learned something else too, something that would shape how I saw the world from that point forward. I learned that the people who help you, the ones who extend a hand when you are at your lowest, are rarely the ones you expect. They are not usually family or old friends. They are strangers who become friends. People like Linda and Joyce and Caroline and Tommy. People who see your humanity and your struggle and decide to care, even though they have no obligation to. That night, I made another silent promise to Mia and to myself. That someday, when I was in a position to do so, I would be that person for someone else. I would remember what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and I would help someone else the way I had been helped. I would pay forward the kindness that had saved us. I did not think about my mother much during those early years. It hurt too much to remember how she had turned her back on us when we needed her most. I focused on moving forward, not looking back. But sometimes, late at night when I could not sleep, I would wonder if she ever thought about us. If she ever regretted her decision. If she ever wondered how we were surviving. I would never know the answer to those questions. At least, not for many years. But that part of the story was still far in the future. For now, I was just a young woman with a baby, working hard, building a life, taking it one day at a time. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good in ways I had not expected. Mia grew from a baby into a bright, curious toddler, and then into a smart, energetic little girl. I grew too, in ways that had nothing to do with age. I learned how to be a mother, how to run a small business, how to stand on my own 2 feet without needing anyone else to hold me up. By the time Mia was 3, my cleaning business had expanded beyond what I ever imagined. What started with Linda's generosity had grown into something real. I had nearly 20 regular clients, a mixture of office buildings, apartment complexes, and private homes. I hired 2 other women to help me, both single mothers themselves who needed flexible work. I knew exactly what that felt like, so I made sure to pay them fairly and work around their schedules. Linda had retired by then, handing over most of her old clients to me. She told me she was proud of what I had built, and coming from her, that meant everything. She had given me more than just a job. She had given me a chance when no one else would, and I never forgot that. I was able to move us to a better apartment when Mia was 4, a real 1-bedroom place in the Columbia City neighborhood. It had hardwood floors, big windows that let in lots of natural light, and a small playground right across the street where Mia could run and play with other kids. For the first time, I felt like we were not just surviving anymore. We were actually living. Mia started preschool that year. Watching her walk into that classroom on the first day, her little backpack almost as big as she was, her hand gripping mine tightly, I had to fight back tears. This was normal. This was what kids were supposed to do. And somehow, despite everything, I had managed to give her that. She loved school immediately. Her teachers told me she was social and bright, always asking questions, always eager to learn. She made friends easily, inviting kids over for playdates that I would host in our apartment, serving snacks and supervising games, feeling like a real mom for the first time. But there were hard moments too. Parent-teacher conferences where I was the only single parent in the room, surrounded by couples who seemed to have their lives so perfectly together. Birthday parties at other kids' houses where I could see the gap between our life and theirs, the big houses and fancy toys and 2-parent families that were so different from what Mia had. School forms that asked for father's information, and I had to write unknown. Mia started asking about her dad when she was 5. Where is he? Why did not I have a daddy like other kids? Does he know about me? I tried to answer honestly without burdening her with details she was too young to understand. I told her that her daddy was not able to be part of our lives, but that it had nothing to do with her. That she was loved and wanted, and that was what mattered. She seemed to accept these answers, at least for a while. But I could see the question in her eyes sometimes when we would see fathers with their daughters at the park or in stores. I could see her trying to understand why our family looked different from everyone else's. Around this time, I started taking night classes at Seattle Central College. It had been 6 years since I had given up on my dream of going to the University of Washington, but I had not given up on education entirely. I wanted to show Mia that learning mattered, that it was never too late to pursue your goals. And I wanted to build a better future for both of us. I studied business administration, figuring it would help me manage and grow my cleaning company. The classes were hard, especially while working full-time and raising Mia, but I loved being back in a classroom. I loved the challenge of learning new things, of pushing my brain in ways I had not done in years. Linda would watch Mia on the 2 evenings a week I had classes. She never asked for payment, but I always left money on her counter anyway, tucking it under a coffee mug where she would find it later. We had developed this dance over the years, her trying to help me for free, and me insisting on paying my own way whenever possible. Mia thrived during these years. She learned to read early, devouring books faster than I could check them out from the library. She took to art, covering our refrigerator with drawings and paintings. She was naturally athletic too, climbing everything, running everywhere, full of boundless energy. I enrolled her in youth soccer when she was 6, and she loved it, playing with fierce determination despite being one of the smallest kids on the team. I made sure she had experiences, even though money was always tight. We went to free concerts in the park during summer. We visited every museum in Seattle on their free admission days. We hiked in the nearby mountains when the weather was nice. I wanted her to see the world as a place full of possibilities, not limited by our financial circumstances. By the time Mia was 8 and I was 27, I had built something I never thought possible. My cleaning business was stable and profitable. I had an associate's degree in business. We had a comfortable apartment, money in savings, and a good life. I had proven to myself and to the world that I could do this, that I could raise a child on my own and build a successful life despite starting with nothing. But there was still an emptiness I carried with me, an ache that I tried to ignore but never quite went away. It was the absence of family beyond just me and Mia. No grandparents for her to visit, no aunts or uncles, no big holiday gatherings. Just the two of us against the world. I thought about my mother sometimes, usually late at night or on holidays. I wondered if she ever regretted what she had done. If she ever thought about the granddaughter she had rejected before even meeting her. If she had any idea what we had accomplished without her. I had not tried to contact her in all these years. Part of it was pride. I wanted to prove I did not need her, that I could make it on my own. But a bigger part was fear. Fear of rejection again. Fear that she still would not care. Fear of opening up old wounds that had mostly scarred over. Mia asked about her grandmother occasionally, usually after spending time with friends who had active grandparents in their lives. I told her the truth in age-appropriate terms. That my mother and I had a disagreement when Mia was a baby, and we had not been in contact since. That it was a complicated adult situation that had nothing to do with Mia herself. When Mia turned 9, I made a decision that felt both scary and necessary. I decided to expand my business into something bigger. I had been thinking about it for months, running numbers, researching the market, trying to decide if I had the courage to take the risk. The idea was to move beyond just cleaning services and start a full property maintenance company. Something that could handle everything from routine cleaning to minor repairs to landscaping for apartment complexes and commercial properties. It would require hiring more staff, investing in equipment and vehicles, taking out a small business loan, and stepping fully into the role of business owner rather than just a woman with a mop and bucket. It was Linda who finally convinced me to do it. She told me I had already done the impossible by building a life from nothing. This was just the next step, and she was right. I had spent 9 years playing it safe, being careful, avoiding risk because I had Mia to think about. But maybe it was time to be bold again, to bet on myself the way I had been forced to do that first night in the shelter. I spent 6 months putting together a business plan, meeting with bank loan officers, researching competitors, and planning every detail. I officially registered the company as Rising Services, a name that felt appropriate given where I had come from. The logo was a simple design of a sunrise over a city skyline. The small business loan came through in March, a week before Mia's 10th birthday. $50,000 that felt like both a fortune and a huge weight of responsibility. This was not just my future on the line anymore. I had employees depending on me, bills to pay, a reputation to maintain. But I was ready. I hired a small team, including a part-time bookkeeper and 3 additional cleaners. I bought a used van for the company and had it painted with our logo. I invested in professional-grade equipment. I put together marketing materials and started aggressively pursuing contracts with property management companies. The first year was brutal. Long hours, constant stress, moments where I was sure I had made a terrible mistake. There were weeks where I was not sure I could make payroll. Clients who were difficult or did not pay on time. Equipment that broke down. Employees who quit without notice. All the challenges that come with running a real business. But there were victories too. Landing a contract with a property management company that oversaw 12 apartment buildings across Seattle. Getting a referral that led to 3 more commercial clients. Hiring a crew supervisor who was reliable and skilled, taking some of the pressure off me. Seeing the business actually turn a profit by month 14. Through it all, Mia remained my priority. I made it to every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference, every school event that mattered. I helped with homework every night. I read to her before bed, even when I was exhausted. I tried to be present in her life, even while building something bigger than just the two of us. By the time Mia turned 12, Rising Services had grown into a respected company in Seattle. We had contracts with over 30 properties, employed 15 people, and generated steady revenue. I was able to buy us a small house in the Renton area, nothing fancy but ours, with a yard where Mia could play and a room of her own that she decorated with posters of her favorite bands and athletes. I was proud of what I had built, not just the business, but the life, the stability, the proof that someone who started with nothing could create something meaningful through sheer determination and hard work. Every time I signed a new contract or deposited money into our savings account or watched Mia thriving in school, I felt vindicated. I had done it without my mother, without Nathan, without anyone who was supposed to help me. Mia was turning into an incredible young woman. She was in 7th grade now, tall for her age with long dark hair like mine and a confidence I never had at that age. She was still playing soccer, now on a competitive travel team. She was getting straight A's in school. She had good friends and healthy interests and a way of seeing the world that was both practical and optimistic. We talked about everything. I had made a commitment early on to be honest with her, to treat her like a person capable of understanding difficult truths rather than sheltering her from reality. She knew our story, how we had started with nothing, how we had lived in a shelter, how I had worked multiple jobs to give us a better life. She knew about her father's abandonment and her grandmother's rejection. I worried sometimes that I had told her too much, burdened her with information she was too young to process. But she seemed to take it all in stride, using our history as motivation rather than letting it weigh her down. She often told her friends that I was her hero, which embarrassed me but also filled me with a pride so intense it sometimes brought tears to my eyes. The summer before Mia started 8th grade, something happened that I had not expected. Linda got sick. She had been having symptoms for months, but had brushed them off as just getting older. By the time she finally went to the doctor, the cancer had already spread. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, one of the deadliest kinds. The news devastated me. Linda had been my rock for over 12 years. She had given me my first chance when no one else would. She had mentored me, encouraged me, believed in me when I did not believe in myself. She had been more of a mother to me than my own mother had ever been. I spent every free moment I had with her over the next 6 months. Mia and I would visit her at home, bringing meals, keeping her company, helping however we could. Linda's daughter was there too, of course, but she worked long shifts and had her own son to care for, so she was grateful for our help. Linda and I talked about everything during those final months. She told me how proud she was of what I had accomplished. She made me promise to keep growing the business, to never stop believing in myself, to continue being the kind of person who helps others the way she had helped me. We laughed about the early days when I had no idea how to properly clean anything, and she had to teach me everything from scratch. She also talked to Mia, giving her advice about life, about being strong, about choosing kindness even when the world is not kind to you. Mia listened to every word, soaking up the wisdom from this woman who had been like a grandmother to her, even though they were not related by blood. Linda passed away in February, 2 weeks after Mia's 13th birthday. The funeral was large, filled with people whose lives she had touched over the years. I gave a eulogy, barely making it through without breaking down completely, talking about how she had saved my life and changed everything for me and Mia. After she died, I felt unmoored for a while, lost. Linda had been such a constant presence in my life for so long that her absence left a hole I did not know how to fill. I threw myself into work, maybe too much, using the business as a distraction from the grief. Mia noticed, of course. She was perceptive that way. One night, about a month after Linda's funeral, she sat down next to me while I was working on invoices at the kitchen table and just put her hand on mine. "You know it is okay to be sad, right?" she said. "You do not always have to be strong. You can miss her." I looked at my 13-year-old daughter, so wise beyond her years, and finally let myself cry properly. She hugged me, this kid I had been protecting and providing for since the day she was born, and for once she was the one taking care of me. It was a strange moment, seeing how much she had grown, realizing that parenting was not just a one-way street anymore. We got through it together, the way we got through everything. And slowly, life found a new normal. The business kept growing. Mia started high school and continued to excel. I hired a general manager for Rising Services, so I could step back a bit from the day-to-day operations and focus more on the big-picture strategy. Money was no longer a constant worry. We were not wealthy by any means, but we were comfortable. I had started a college fund for Mia years ago, and it was growing steadily. We could afford small luxuries now, things that would have been impossible in those early years. Eating out occasionally, new clothes instead of thrift store finds, a decent car that did not break down constantly. I was 33 years old, and I had built a good life. Not the life I had imagined when I was 18 and planning to go to college, but a good life nonetheless. I had a thriving business, a wonderful daughter, a home we owned, financial security. By any reasonable measure, I had succeeded. But sometimes, late at night, I still felt that empty space where family should be. I still wondered about my mother, still carried the hurt of her rejection, even though 14 years had passed. Still wished, despite everything, that Mia had grandparents and extended family like other kids did. I never tried to contact my mother. My pride would not allow it. She had made her choice all those years ago, and I had made mine. I had built this life without her, and I did not need her to validate it. That is what I told myself, anyway. Whether it was true, or just a story I repeated to make myself feel better, I was not entirely sure. Mia's freshman year of high school flew by. She joined the school newspaper, continued with soccer, got involved in student government. She was popular without being part of any particular clique, friendly with everyone from the honor students to the kids who struggled. She had inherited my work ethic, but none of my insecurity, and I love that about her. We had conversations that year about her future. She wanted to go to college, maybe study journalism or political science. She talked about wanting to make a difference in the world, to help people who were struggling the way we had struggled. She had grown up seeing how hard I worked to help my employees, how I gave people chances even when they had difficult circumstances, and she wanted to do something similar on a larger scale. I told her she could be anything she wanted to be, that I would support her no matter what path she chose. And I meant it. I had spent 15 years making sure she would have opportunities one never had, making sure that she would not have to choose between her dreams and survival the way I had been forced to. By the time Mia was 16, life felt stable in a way it never had before. Rising Services was profitable and growing. I had been able to hire a strong management team that could handle operations while I focused on business development and strategy. Mia was thriving, getting ready to start her junior year of high school, starting to visit colleges and think seriously about her future. I was 35 years old. It had been 16 years since my mother had thrown me out. 16 years of struggling and building and fighting for every inch of progress. And I had made it. Not just survived, but truly made it. That is when everything changed. That is when my mother came back into my life. It was a Saturday afternoon in early September. Mia was at soccer practice and I was home alone, catching up on paperwork and enjoying the rare quiet. The weather was typical for Seattle that time of year, overcast and cool but not yet raining, the kind of day where you could feel autumn approaching. When the doorbell rang, I was not expecting anyone. I put down my laptop and went to the door, assuming it was a delivery, or maybe one of the neighbors. I opened it without looking through the peephole first. My mother stood on my front porch. For a moment, I could not process what I was seeing. It had been 16 years. 16 years since she had closed the door on me and Mia. 16 years without a single phone call, letter, or any indication that she cared whether we were alive or dead. And now here she was, standing in front of me like no time had passed at all. She looked older, of course. She was 60 now, her hair mostly gray where it had been dark before. There were deep lines around her eyes and mouth. She looked thinner than I remembered, almost frail, wearing jeans and a cardigan that seemed too big for her frame. We stared at each other for what felt like forever, but was probably only seconds. I saw 1,000 emotions flash across her face. Uncertainty, guilt, something that might have been hope. I did not know what my own face was showing, but inside I felt like I had been hit by a truck. "Hello," she said finally, her voice quieter than I remembered. "Her name is Victoria. I know I am probably the last person you expected to see." I did not respond. Could not respond. My hand was still on the door, my whole body frozen somewhere between shock and anger I did not know I was still carrying after all these years. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Please. I need to talk to you." I should have said no. Should have closed the door in her face, the way she had done to me all those years ago. Should have told her that she had no right to show up now after everything. But I did not do any of those things. Instead, I stepped back and let her in, my body moving on autopilot while my brain tried to catch up with what was happening. She walked into my living room, looking around at the comfortable furniture, the photos of Mia on the walls, the evidence of the life I had built without her. I saw her pause at a photo of Mia at her 8th grade graduation, studying it closely. "She is beautiful," my mother said softly. "She looks like you did at that age." "Her name is Mia," I said, finally finding my voice. "And you would have known that if you had cared to ask any time in the past 16 years. My mother flinched but did not argue. She sat down on the couch without being invited, and I remained standing, arms crossed, maintaining physical distance, even though I had let her into my home. "I know I have no right to be here," she started. "I know what I did was unforgivable. But I need your help, and I did not know where else to turn." Of course she needed something. She had not come here to apologize or to meet her granddaughter, or because she had spent 16 years regretting what she had done. She needed help. The irony was almost funny. Almost. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended, but not as cold as it probably should have been. My mother took a deep breath, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. "I am sick. Cancer. It started in my breast, but it has spread to my lymph nodes and lungs. The doctors give me maybe 6 months, possibly less." I should have felt something at this news, sympathy or sadness or concern, but all I felt was numb, empty, like she was telling me about a stranger's diagnosis rather than her own. "I am sorry to hear that," I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it at least partly. "But I still do not understand why you are here. What do you need from me?" She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture that was familiar from my childhood. "I am alone. I have no one. I am going through treatment, but it is not working well and the side effects are terrible. I cannot work anymore. I am behind on rent. I am going to lose my apartment. I have nowhere to go and no one to help me, and I just thought maybe," she paused, looking at me with desperate hope, "maybe you would help me. Even after everything I did, even though I do not deserve it." The request hung in the air between us. She wanted me to take her in, to care for her, to help her through her final months after she had thrown me out during the hardest time of my life. The audacity of it was breathtaking. "You have got to be kidding me," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You kicked me out with a 2-month-old baby. You told me I was a mistake you could not afford to carry. You closed the door on us and never looked back. And now you want me to what? Take care of you? Let you live here?" "I know how it sounds," she said quickly. "I know I have no right to ask. But you are my daughter. You are the only family I have. And I am dying. I am scared and alone, and I do not know what else to do." I turned away from her, pacing to the window, trying to control the emotions that were threatening to overwhelm me. Anger, hurt, disbelief, and underneath it all, a confused tangle of feelings I could not even name. "Where have you been for 16 years?" I asked, still facing the window. "Did you ever wonder if we were okay? If Mia was healthy? If we had food to eat or a place to sleep? Did you ever think about us at all?" "Every day," she said quietly. "I thought about you every single day." I spun around to face her. "Then why did you not call? Why did you not try to reach out? Why did you not want to be part of your granddaughter's life?" "Because I was ashamed," she said, tears flowing freely now. "Because I was a coward. Because the longer I went without contacting you, the harder it became. Because I convinced myself you were better off without me. Because I am weak and selfish, and I made terrible choices that I have regretted every day since." Her honesty caught me off guard. I had expected excuses or justifications. Instead, she was owning what she had done, at least to some degree. It did not make it better, but it made it harder to maintain my righteous anger. "I do not know if I can do this," I said. "I do not know if I can just forgive what you did and take care of you like nothing happened." "I am not asking for forgiveness," my mother said. "I am asking for help. I am asking for mercy I do not deserve. And I am asking you to let me meet my granddaughter before I die. To tell you both how sorry I am and how wrong I was. Before I could respond, I heard the front door open. Mia's voice called out as she came in from practice. Mom, I am home. Coach says I am starting in the game next week. She appeared in the living room doorway, still in her soccer uniform, her face flushed and happy. Then she saw my mother sitting on the couch and stopped, confused. Oh, I did not know we had company. I looked at my daughter, at her open, trusting face, and then at my mother, who was staring at Mia with an expression of wonder and pain and regret so intense it was almost physical. Mia, I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. This is your grandmother. My mother. Victoria. Mia's eyes went wide. She looked between us, trying to process this information. My grandmother? The one who we have not seen since I was a baby. Yes, I said simply. Mia walked further into the room, studying my mother with the same careful observation she applied to everything. My mother stood up, and I could see her trembling slightly. You are so grown up, my mother said. So beautiful and strong. I am sorry I have not been part of your life. I am sorry for more than you could possibly know. Mia did not say anything for a long moment. Then she asked the question I had been too proud to ask. Why are you here now? I looked at my mother, curious to see how she would answer. Would she lie to her granddaughter? Would she pretend this was about reconnection rather than need? To my surprise, my mother told the truth. Because I am dying and I have nowhere else to go. Because I need help and your mother is the only family I have. Because I threw away 16 years that I can never get back, and now I am running out of time to try to make it right, even though I know I cannot. Mia absorbed this with a maturity that reminded me she was not a little girl anymore. She looked at me. What are you going to do? I do not know, I admitted. This is complicated. Mia nodded slowly. Then she said something that surprised me. She made a terrible mistake. She hurt you, and she hurt me by not being in our lives. But she is family, and she is dying. Maybe we should at least listen to what she has to say. I stared at my daughter, amazed at her capacity for compassion. She had every right to be angry, to reject this woman who had rejected us. But instead, she was choosing the harder path, the one that required opening old wounds and facing difficult truths. Can you give us a minute? I asked Mia. She nodded and left the room, heading upstairs to her bedroom. I heard the door close gently. I sat down across from my mother, suddenly exhausted. Tell me everything, I said. Tell me what happened after you threw us out. Tell me why you made the choices you made. And tell me the truth about what is happening now. All of it. And she did. For the next 2 hours, my mother told me things she had never shared before. About how she had been terrified when she got pregnant with me at 24, how my father had left and she had raised me alone while working impossible hours. About how she had sacrificed everything for my education and future. About how she had been so focused on making sure I went to college that she saw my pregnancy as the destruction of everything she had worked for. She told me about the night she kicked us out, how she had cried herself to sleep afterward, how she had almost called me back a dozen times, but her pride and stubbornness would not let her. She told me about the years that followed, how she had tried to find information about us but did not know where to start, how she had driven by the shelter a few times, hoping to see us but never did. She told me about her diagnosis 6 months ago, about the failed treatments, and the financial devastation that came with cancer when you have inadequate insurance, about losing her job because she could not work through the treatment side effects, about burning through what little savings she had, about facing the terrifying prospect of dying alone with no one to care. I listened to all of it, and slowly, against my will, I started to see her as something more than just the person who had hurt me. I started to see her as a flawed human being who had made terrible choices out of fear and disappointment and her own unhealed wounds. It did not excuse what she had done, but it helped me understand it in a way I never had before. When she finished talking, we sat in silence for a while. Finally, I said, I need time to think about this. I need to talk to Mia. This is not just my decision to make. And I need you to understand that even if I agree to help you, it does not mean everything is suddenly okay between us. It does not erase the past 16 years. I understand, my mother said. I am not expecting forgiveness or for things to go back to how they were. I just want a chance to know my granddaughter before I die. To tell you both that I am sorry. To try, in whatever small way I can, to make up for some of what I took from you. I gave her my phone number and told her I would call her in a few days with my decision. She left, and I sat alone in my living room for a long time, trying to process everything that had just happened. That evening, Mia and I talked for hours. I told her everything about that night 16 years ago, details I had not shared before. I told her about the shelter, about the fear and desperation, about how her grandmother's rejection had shaped so much of our life. I also told her what my mother had said today about her regrets and her current situation. Mia listened to all of it, asking thoughtful questions, processing information in that careful way she had. Finally, she said, I think we should help her. Not because she deserves it, but because we are better than that. Because you taught me that kindness matters, even when it is hard. Because holding on to anger only hurts us. I looked at my 16-year-old daughter and felt a surge of pride, so powerful it almost hurt. When did you get so wise? I asked. She smiled, that beautiful smile that could light up any room. I learned from the best. Over the next few days, I wrestled with the decision. I talked to my therapist, someone I had started seeing a few years earlier to work through some of the trauma from my past. I talked to Mia more. I made lists of pros and cons. I lay awake at night trying to figure out what the right thing to do was. In the end, it came down to one simple truth. I did not want to be the kind of person who turned away someone in need, even someone who had hurt me deeply. I did not want Mia to learn that lesson from me. And despite everything, despite all the pain and anger and hurt, this woman was my mother. And she was dying. I called her 4 days later and told her she could stay with us. But I laid out clear conditions. She would see a therapist to work through our family issues. She would be honest with Mia about everything. She would respect my boundaries and my rules. And if at any point her presence became harmful to Mia, she would leave. She agreed to everything without hesitation. A week later, I helped her move her few belongings into our guest room. It was surreal, watching my mother carry boxes into my house, seeing her settle into a space in the life I had built without her. The first few weeks were awkward and tense. We moved around each other carefully, like strangers forced to share space. Mia was the bridge between us, asking my mother questions about her life, about my childhood, about things I had never known or had forgotten. My mother seemed determined to make the most of whatever time she had left, answering every question honestly, even the difficult ones. She told me about my father, things I had never known, how they had met in college, how he had seemed charming at first but became increasingly unreliable, how he had promised to be there for us but left when I was 5 and never came back, how my mother had worked multiple jobs to make sure I had everything I needed, sacrificing her own happiness and social life to provide for me. Hearing these stories gave me a different perspective on my childhood. I had always known my mother worked hard, but I had not fully understood the depth of her sacrifice or how much she had given up. It did not excuse what she had done to me and Mia, but it added context I had not had before. My mother went to chemotherapy appointments twice a week. I drove her to most of them, sitting in the waiting room while she underwent treatment. Sometimes Mia came with us, doing homework or reading while we waited. Other times it was just me and my mother, sitting in uncomfortable silence or having stilted conversations about neutral topics like the weather or what to make for dinner. Slowly, painfully, we started to rebuild something. Not the relationship we had before, that was gone forever. But something new. Something built on honesty and hard truths, rather than unspoken expectations. One evening about a month after she moved in, my mother and I were alone in the kitchen. Mia was upstairs doing homework, and I was making dinner while my mother sat at the table, too weak from that day's treatment to do much else. I am proud of you, she said suddenly. I know I have no right to be, but I am. What you have built, how you raised Mia, the person you have become. You did it all without me, and you did it better than I ever could have. I stopped chopping vegetables and looked at her. That is not true. I spent years wishing you were there. Wishing Mia had a grandmother. Wishing I had someone to call when things got hard or to celebrate with when things went well. I know, she said quietly, and I am sorry. I was so angry when you got pregnant. I saw all my years of sacrifice and hard work disappearing. I saw you throwing away your future the same way your father threw away his responsibilities. I could not see past my own disappointment to recognize that you were still my daughter and you needed me. Why did you not reach out? I asked, a question that had haunted me for 16 years. Even if you could not forgive me at first, why did you never try later? Why did you let 16 years go by? She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, at first it was pride and anger. Then it was shame. And then it was fear. Fear that you would reject me the way I rejected you. Fear that too much time had passed. Fear that I had destroyed something that could never be repaired. So I told myself you were better off without me. That you had probably built a good life and moved on. It was easier than facing what I had done. You should have tried, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You should have fought for us the way I had to fight for everything. You should have been brave enough to face your own shame and try to fix what you broke. You are right, she said simply. I should have, and I will regret that failure for whatever time I have left. We continued making dinner in silence, but something had shifted. The truth was finally out in the open, raw and painful but no longer hidden. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Over the following months, my mother grew weaker. The chemotherapy was not working. The cancer was spreading faster than the doctors had predicted. She spent more time in bed, struggled with pain and nausea, lost weight she could not afford to lose. But despite her physical decline, there was a lightness to her I had never seen before. She seemed genuinely happy to be with us, to have this time with Mia, to be part of a family again, even in such difficult circumstances. She told stories from her own childhood, shared photos I had never seen, answered questions about our family history that I had always wondered about. Mia spent hours with her grandmother, especially on weekends. They would sit together in the guest room, Mia reading aloud from books my mother could no longer focus on, or just talking about everything and nothing. My mother told Mia things she had never told me, about her own dreams that she had given up, about the loneliness of single parenthood, about the regrets that came with getting old. One Saturday afternoon in December, about 4 months after my mother moved in, I found them looking through old photo albums. My mother had brought them from her apartment, pictures from my childhood that I had not seen in years. Mia was fascinated, asking questions about every photo, wanting to know the stories behind each image. That is your mom at your age, my mother said, pointing to a picture of me at 16. She was on the track team. She was so fast, won medals at every meet. I was so proud of her. I stood in the doorway watching them, and something inside me finally broke open. All the anger and hurt I had been carrying for so many years started to dissolve, replaced by something more complicated. Grief for the time we had lost, gratitude for the time we had now, and a sad understanding that life is messy and people are flawed, and sometimes the only way forward is through forgiveness, even when it is hard. That evening, after Mia went to bed, my mother and I sat in the living room together. The Christmas tree we had put up the week before glowed softly in the corner, and snow was falling outside, unusual for Seattle but beautiful. I forgive you, I said quietly. It does not erase what happened or change the past. But I forgive you, and I am glad you are here now. I am glad Mia got to know you. I am glad we had this time, even though the circumstances are terrible. My mother started crying, deep sobs that shook her thin frame. Thank you, she managed to say. Thank you for giving me this chance, for letting me know my granddaughter, for showing me what strength and grace look like. You are a better person than I ever was. We sat together for a long time, not saying anything, just being present with each other in a way we never had been before. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white, making everything look clean and new. My mother passed away in early February, 3 weeks after Mia's 17th birthday. She died at home, in the guest room that had become hers, with me and Mia by her side. Her last words were to Mia, telling her to take care of me and to never forget how strong she was. The grief hit me harder than I expected. I grieved for the mother I had lost all those years ago and again now. I grieved for the grandmother Mia only got to know for 5 months. I grieved for all the time we had wasted, all the years we could have had together if pride and fear had not stood in the way. But I also felt a strange sense of peace. We had reconciled, however imperfectly. We had said the things that needed to be said. Mia had gotten to know her grandmother and hear family stories that would have been lost otherwise. My mother had not died alone, and I had learned that forgiveness, even when it comes late, still matters. The funeral was small, just me and Mia and a few people my mother had known from her work years ago. Mia read a eulogy she had written, talking about her grandmother with a maturity and compassion that made me incredibly proud. She talked about second chances and the importance of family and how love can survive even when it seems broken beyond repair. In the weeks after the funeral, Mia and I talked a lot about everything that had happened. She asked if I regretted taking my mother in, if I thought I had made the right choice. I told her the truth, that it had been one of the hardest things I had ever done, but that I did not regret it. That some decisions are not about what is easy, but about what is right. Life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such an intense few months. Mia finished her junior year of high school and started the college application process. Rising services continued to grow. I found myself thinking about my mother often, remembering not just the pain she had caused, but also the woman she had been in those final months. Honest, vulnerable, trying to make amends even when it was too late to fix everything. One evening in late spring, Mia and I were sitting on the back porch watching the sunset. It was one of those perfect Seattle evenings, warm but not hot, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. Out of nowhere, Mia said, "I am glad she came back. I am glad we got to know her, even if it was just for a little while." "Me too," I said, meaning it. "Me too." Mia leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat together in comfortable silence. I thought about the journey we had been on, from that rainy night 16 years ago to this moment now. All the struggles and triumphs, all the pain and joy, all the ways we had grown and changed. I thought about the girl I had been, 19 and terrified, standing in the rain with a 2-month-old baby and nowhere to go. I thought about how that girl had somehow found the strength to keep going, to build a life, to raise an incredible daughter against impossible odds. And I thought about my mother, the choices she had made, the regrets she carried, the courage it took to come back and ask for help even knowing she might be rejected. I understood now that people are complex, that hurt people, that forgiveness is not about condoning bad behavior but about refusing to let bitterness poison your own life. "You know what I learned from all of this?" Mia said, pulling me from my thoughts. "That family is complicated and messy but worth fighting for. That people can change, even if it is late. And that you taught me the most important lesson of all." "What is that?" I asked. "That strength is not about never falling down or never needing help. It is about getting back up every single time. It is about facing hard things even when you're scared. It is about choosing kindness even when you have every right to be angry. You showed me all of that. You have been showing me my whole life." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I was smiling too. "When did you get so wise?" I asked, the same question I had asked her months ago. "I learned from the best," she repeated, squeezing my hand. We sat together as the sun set completely and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. I thought about everything we had been through, everything we had survived, everything we had built together. And I realized that despite all the pain and struggle, despite my mother's rejection and the years of hardship that followed, I would not change our story. Because that struggle had made me who I was. It had taught me resilience and compassion and strength I never knew I possessed. It had shown me what truly matters in life and what does not. It had given me perspective that many people never gain. And most importantly, it had shaped how I raised Mia, ensuring that she grew up understanding the value of hard work, the importance of kindness, and the power of perseverance. A year after my mother's death, on a warm September afternoon, I stood in the crowd at the University of Washington watching Mia walk across campus for freshman orientation. She had been accepted with a full scholarship, planning to study social work with a focus on helping young mothers in difficult circumstances. She wanted to be for others what Linda had been for me, what Joyce had been, what so many people had been during our hardest times. As I watched her laughing with other incoming students, confident and bright, and so full of potential, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Not because of the business I had built, or the house I owned, or the financial stability I had achieved, but because I had raised this incredible human being who chose compassion over bitterness, who saw her own difficult start as motivation to help others, rather than a reason to be angry at the world. My phone buzzed with a text from one of my employees asking about a scheduling issue. I dealt with it quickly, then looked back toward campus. Mia had spotted me and was waving, her smile bright enough to light up the whole quad. I waved back, my heart so full it felt like it might burst. That evening, After I helped Mia move into her dorm room and said my goodbyes, I drove home through the familiar Seattle streets. The city looked different than it had 17 years ago when I was navigating it as a homeless teenager with a newborn. Or maybe I was the one who was different. Probably both. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at my house. The lights were on inside, warm and welcoming. This was home. This was the life I had built from nothing. And it was good. Inside, I made myself dinner and settled onto the couch with a cup of tea. The house felt empty without Mia, quieter than I was used to. I found myself looking at the photos on the wall, the visual timeline of our life together. Baby pictures from those early shelter days. Mia's first birthday party in our tiny studio apartment. Elementary school photos. Soccer team pictures. High school graduation just a few months ago. There was also a photo from my mother's last Christmas with us. All three of us together. My mother thin and weak but smiling genuinely, Mia in the middle with her arms around both of us, and me looking more at peace than I had felt in years. It was the only photo I had of 3 generations of our family together. I picked up the frame and studied it. My mother's face looked happy in a way I rarely saw during my childhood. Whatever pain and regret she carried, she had found some measure of peace in those final months. And she had given us something too, not just family history and stories, but also a lesson about forgiveness and second chances that I would carry with me always. My phone rang. It was Mia, calling from her dorm room, excited and nervous about her first night away from home. We talked for almost an hour, about her roommate who seemed nice, about the campus tour she had taken, about the classes she was excited to start, about how strange it felt to be on her own for the first time. "Are you okay?" she asked toward the end of the conversation. "I know this is hard for you too, me leaving." "I am okay," I said honestly. "I am proud of you. I am excited for you. And I am grateful for every moment we have had together. You made everything worth it, you know. Every struggle, every hard day, every sacrifice. You made it all mean something." "Mom," she said, and I could hear the emotion in her voice. "Thank you. For everything. For never giving up. For showing me what strength looks like. For giving me opportunities you never had. For being the best mom anyone could ask for." We said our goodnights and I sat alone in the quiet house, feeling the weight and lightness of this new chapter. Mia was starting her adult life, and I was entering a phase where I was no longer defined primarily by being her mother. It was scary and exciting and bittersweet all at once. Over the following weeks, I adjusted to life with Mia away at college. The house felt too big and too quiet. I threw myself into work, expanding Rising services into new markets, hiring more staff, taking on bigger contracts. The business had become more successful than I ever imagined, generating enough income that I could have stepped back if I wanted to. But work gave me purpose and structure, and I was not ready to slow down yet. I also started volunteering with a nonprofit that helped homeless women and families. It was something I had thought about for years but had never made time for. Now, with Mia away and my schedule more flexible, I could finally give back in a direct way to people facing the same struggles I had faced. The first time I walked into the family shelter to volunteer, I was flooded with memories. The smell of industrial cleaner, the sound of babies crying, the defeated expressions on women's faces as they tried to figure out how to survive another day. It all came rushing back, and for a moment I almost turned around and left. But then a young woman approached me, maybe 19 or 20, holding an infant who could not have been more than a few weeks old. She looked exhausted and scared and so painfully young. She asked if I knew where the intake office was, and when I pointed her in the right direction, I saw tears of relief in her eyes. In that moment, I saw myself 17 years ago. I saw the girl I had been, desperate and alone and trying so hard to be brave when I was terrified. And I knew this was exactly where I needed to be. I started volunteering every Tuesday evening, helping with intake, talking to women about resources, offering encouragement and practical advice. I shared my own story with those who seemed receptive to hearing it, not to brag about what I had achieved, but to offer hope that things could get better. Some of the women I met reminded me so much of my younger self. Single mothers who had been rejected by their families. Women fleeing abuse or addiction or just crushing poverty. Women who loved their children desperately but had no idea how they were going to provide for them. I listened to their stories and shared resources, and, when appropriate, I offered jobs at Rising Services to women who were ready to work but needed flexible schedules and patient employers. I remembered how Linda had given me that first chance, and I wanted to be that person for others. One evening, I met a girl named Sophie who was 18 with a 3-month-old son. Her story was eerily similar to mine. Religious parents who had kicked her out when she got pregnant. A boyfriend who had disappeared. No job, no support system, no clear path forward. She sat in the shelter intake room crying, her baby fussing in her arms, looking like her whole world had ended. I sat with her for over an hour, just talking. I told her my story, about being thrown out at 19 with a 2-month-old, about living in this very shelter, about how impossible everything seemed. But I also told her about Linda and Joyce and all the people who had helped me, about the tiny steps forward that eventually added up to a whole new life, about my daughter who was now thriving in college, about the business I had built and the home I owned. She listened with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "You really did all that?" she asked, "starting from where I am now?" "I really did," I confirmed. "It was not easy and it took years, but yes. And if I could do it, you can too. You are not alone, even though I know it feels that way right now." Before I left that evening, I gave Sophie my card and told her to call me if she needed anything, advice, a reference for jobs, or just someone to talk to. I did not know if she would actually call, but I wanted her to know that someone cared about what happened to her and her son. She did call, about a week later. She had found temporary housing through a program and was looking for work. Could I really give her a chance at my company like I had mentioned? I met with her the next day and hired her on the spot, starting her in a flexible evening cleaning position that would allow her to bring her son along if needed, just like Linda had done for me. Watching Sophie slowly gain confidence and stability over the following months felt like completing a circle. I had been helped when I needed it most, and now I could do the same for someone else. It gave meaning to everything I had been through, transforming my pain into purpose. Mia came home for Thanksgiving that year, full of stories about college life and her classes and the friends she had made. She looked happy and healthy and more mature than when she had left just a few months earlier. Over dinner, she asked about my volunteer work and about Sophie, whose story I had shared with her on the phone. "You are doing what Grandma should have done for us," Mia said thoughtfully. "You are being the support system for others that we needed but did not have." "I suppose I am," I agreed. "But I am also just paying forward what was given to me. Linda and Joyce and so many others helped us when they did not have to. This is my way of honoring that." "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if Grandma had not kicked us out?" Mia asked. "If she had supported us from the beginning?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "In some ways, it might have been easier. But in other ways, I think the struggle made us who we are. It taught us things we never would have learned otherwise. It made us appreciate what we have in a way people who have never struggled cannot really understand." Mia nodded slowly. "I think you are right. And I think going through what we did is part of why I want to do the work I am planning to do. Why I want to help families in crisis. Because I understand it in a way that goes beyond textbooks and theories." We talked late into the night about life and choices and the complicated nature of family. We talked about my mother and the reconciliation we had before she died, about whether she had truly changed or just regretted the consequences of her choices. We talked about forgiveness and whether it requires forgetting, about moving forward while still acknowledging the past. These were not simple conversations with easy answers, but they were important conversations, the kind that happen between people who have been through difficult things together and come out stronger on the other side. The years continued to pass in that strange way they do once you reach a certain age, seeming both fast and slow simultaneously. Mia excelled in college, graduated with honors, went on to graduate school for her master's in social work. Rising Services continued to grow and thrive, eventually employing over 40 people and servicing properties all across the Seattle metro area. I bought a bigger house in a nicer neighborhood, something I never could have imagined when I was sleeping on a cot in a shelter. But I kept the old house too, converting it into transitional housing for young mothers, a place where women like Sophie could stay while getting on their feet, paying minimal rent and receiving support and resources. The program grew organically, starting with just that one house, but eventually expanding to 3 properties. I hired social workers and case managers, funded scholarships and childcare assistance, created job training programs. It became almost like a second business, though one where profit was never the goal. Mia was instrumental in setting up many of these programs, using what she was learning in school to create comprehensive support systems for the women we served. She interned at the nonprofit that had helped me find housing years ago, then joined their staff after graduation, working directly with young mothers facing homelessness. We worked together often, me providing housing and employment opportunities, her connecting women to comprehensive services and support. It felt right, this partnership between us, using our own experiences to help others navigate similar challenges. When Mia was 25 and I was 44, she came to me with big news. She had been offered a position as the director of a new program that would provide wraparound services to young families experiencing homelessness. It was everything she had been working toward, a chance to make real systemic change rather than just helping one family at a time. "I am so proud of you," I told her, hugging her tight. "You are going to do incredible things." "I learned from the best," she said for what must have been the 100th time in her life. "You showed me that one person really can make a difference, that caring matters, that the hard path is sometimes the right path." We celebrated with dinner at a nice restaurant downtown, the kind of place I never could have afforded in those early years. As we ate and talked and laughed, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought us to this moment. 26 years had passed since my mother threw me out. 26 years of struggle and growth and building a life from nothing. So much had happened in that time. So much had changed, but some things remained constant. My love for my daughter, my determination to help others, my belief that kindness and hard work and perseverance could overcome almost any obstacle. Later that night, alone in my too-big house, I thought about my mother. She had been gone for 9 years now, but I still thought about her often. I wondered what she would think if she could see what we had built, the lives we were touching, the difference we were making. I liked to think she would be proud, that she would see how the pain she caused had been transformed into purpose, that she would understand that her final act of vulnerability and asking for help had taught us something valuable about humility and forgiveness. But I would never know for sure. She was gone, taking her thoughts and feelings with her. All I had were my own interpretations, my own meaning-making from a complicated and painful history. What I didn't know was this: I had survived. More than survived, I had thrived. I had raised an incredible daughter who was now out in the world doing good and important work. I had built businesses that provided jobs and opportunities. I had created programs that helped women in crisis. I had transformed my own pain into something that could ease the pain of others. And I had learned the most important lesson of all, that we are not defined by what happens to us but by how we respond to it. That rejection and abandonment and struggle can either destroy us or make us stronger. That forgiveness is not about excusing bad behavior, but about freeing ourselves from bitterness. That family is not just about blood, but about who shows up and who stays, and who chooses to love us even when it is hard. My mother had kicked me out with my baby in my arms 26 years ago. Years later, she had knocked on my door asking for help. In between those two moments was a whole lifetime of struggle and triumph, pain and joy, falling and rising. And somehow, impossibly, it had all worked out. Not perfectly, not without scars, but it had worked out. We had made it. And in the process, we had become people we could be proud of. I went to bed that night feeling grateful. Grateful for Mia and for Linda and for all the people who had helped us along the way. Grateful for the strength I had found when I needed it. Grateful even, in a complicated way, for my mother and the lessons her absence and eventual return had taught me. Life is messy and hard and rarely goes according to plan. People hurt each other, sometimes unforgivably. But people also heal and grow and change. They find strength in impossible situations. They build beautiful things from broken pieces. They learn to forgive the unforgivable and to love despite the pain. That was my story. That was our story. And I would not change it, even if I could. Because every struggle, every hardship, every moment of despair had led us to exactly where we were supposed to be. And where we were was good. It was really, truly good.